about
Maybe just
longshoremen
don't even,
right now.
right now, starting now.
I love longshoremen.
Did I get my own name back? Yeah, I did. Okay. I moved to another chair when I was here for a different meeting.
I understand it's
Hang on. Are we live?
We are live, yes.
Okay.
We're live.
I am living, you are living, we are present.
Oh no. It wants me to sign in. Why can't it remember me? Okay, I can do this.
Okay, everybody, welcome and thank you for coming a few minutes early. We have a full agenda this evening, and I'd like to welcome you to the regular meeting of the Corporation of the City of Nelson. We would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Tanoha, the Sinixt, and the Sinixt people, and is home to the Métis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honor their connection to the lands and rivers and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as our community. I'd like to further acknowledge that June is National Indigenous History Month and that June 21st will be National Indigenous Peoples Day. I think it's important when we think about June and think about truth and reconciliation, not just in June but throughout the year, that June is about recognizing the achievements of Indigenous peoples, but also understanding what happened on this land before we can even get to reconciliation. The concept of truth before reconciliation. We need to talk about some of the truths that have happened in the past and understand why we are here and where we're at. So as we keep that in mind this month, as we go through, there's opportunities throughout the city, at the museum and at the library, identifying and celebrating Indigenous History Month. I'd also like to point out that June is Pride Month, celebrating our 2S LGBTQAI community. And although we don't celebrate Pride necessarily in June, September is a month that we do it in here in Nelson, but I do want to acknowledge that this is Pride Month. It's being celebrated nationally. Anybody got a late item? So no late items. If I could have an adoption of the agenda as circulated, moved by Councillor Page, seconded by Councillor Woodward. All in favor? And that carries. And if I could have someone move adoption of the regular council meeting of April 9th, Councillor Tate, seconded by Councillor Woodward. Any errors or omissions, councillors? Seeing none, all those in favor, and that carries. So item 6, we're going to do a little bit of an in-camera right off the top here. So a resolution closing the meeting to the public. It is the opinion of council that the public interest requires that persons, other than members of council and staff and any approved audiences, be excluded from this meeting, and that the meeting of the council continue under sections 91E regarding land and improvements and section 91G and I regarding litigation and legal advice subject to solicitor-client privilege. If I could have someone move that. Moved by Tate, seconded by Page. All those in favor, and that carries. So we'll just give a moment to close.
Little bucks.
Big bucks, tons of bucks. Going to Hawaii frequently.
I'm going to Calgary.
We on?
No. Yeah,
There's-
we are.
Okay, welcome back, everybody, and thank you. And we're on to item number 7 of the regular meeting agenda. And tonight we're having a Hydro Services Bylaw update. The City of Nelson Hydro Services Bylaw 3196, which serves as the Nelson Hydro Terms and Conditions of Service, was last revised in 2012. Since that time, technology, terminology, and industry best practice have evolved, and the bylaw needs to be updated. Nelson Hydro staff has undergone a thorough review of the terms and conditions to update, reorganize, and reformat the bylaw with the intent of making it easier for staff and customers to use. Staff are now providing a summary of changes to council and they're requesting feedback prior to finalization and initiating the bylaw adoption process. So, Casey, over to you.
All right, there was a slide presentation here. I don't know if that's what's on the screen or not, but if you want to follow along, I'm not sure how to put that up.
Okay, hang on 1 second. Working on it.
There it is. Ta-da.
All right. All right, we'll give you guys a quick overview. I'm Casey Smith. I think I've met most of you guys here and there, but Project Customer Service Manager with Nelson Hydro. And we'll try to make bylaws exciting tonight.
Make it exciting.
Sorry, can you just make sure the microphone is blue? Can you see? Push it on.
Here.
All right.
Thank you.
You do kind of can't be too far.
All right, we'll give it a go.
Okay.
Forward.
And you can sit. I mean, you don't have to, unless you want to stand.
Yeah,
Yeah, just relax. It's just
Guess
more
I can
that
stand for a
they,
while.
they can't hear you if the thing isn't on blue, so.
All right. So yeah, the Nelson Hydro Services Bylaw, terms and conditions for all of our customers, kind of implicitly, when you take services from Nelson Hydro. It is reviewed periodically, but the last review was in 2012. So there's been a lot of changes in the industry. There's also been some improvements noticed just through general use of them, ways that we can improve on clarity and consistency throughout. The bylaws need to be approved, or revisions to the bylaws need to be approved by both the City of Nelson as a municipal utility and the BC Utilities Commission for our rural customers as a public utility as well. So quite a lengthy process here. This is this current initiative to revise the bylaws has been going on since 2021, I believe it was initiated. Lots of changes came about. The BCUC informed us that we should delay this process while our generic cost of capital and other proceedings were ongoing. So there was a bit of a delay there, but now that we've finalized some of our other proceedings, there is an opportunity to get the bylaws taken care of. So here we are. 6 major changes to highlight. We've got a slide on each, so these are the talking points for tonight. We are incorporating elements of Bylaw 3092, which is currently the Services and Fees Bylaw. The intent here is to simplify and consolidate to make them more user-friendly. So we're going to pull in relevant fees and charges from that bylaw. Table of contents, shortened. We have tried to consolidate relevant sections, get rid of schedules, try to make it easy to reference for average citizens as well as contractors who rely on these terms and conditions. I don't know if it's overall shorter or not, but we have consolidated. Formatting and language changes have been made throughout the document. Again, we've consolidated. We've updated relevant terms. One of them's up there. Technical Safety BC is now the Safety Authority, so they're referenced throughout. We've added definitions to terms that previously were not defined and could have multiple interpretations. And we've updated some of the graphics, including our service area map. Service area hasn't changed, but just some clearer graphics. So fees and charges, these are not related to the rates you pay or customers pay for their electricity on demand. These are the fees associated with additional services, new connections, upgrades, meter change outs, that type of thing. For I guess ease of use, we have tried to go with fixed fees for the most common services that are provided. That might be your average residential house. So those are based on fixed fees, whereas more complicated jobs such as large residential customers with high demand or commercial customers where the situation can be more complex, anything over 600 amps, those are all done on an actual cost basis. And so costs are tracked to then billed back to customers appropriately. For the fixed rate items, we've based it on our current Nelson Hydro charge-out rates. there's been allowances made for travel time to an average site. We've tried to standardize that. There are different rates for North Shore versus urban. There are larger travel times associated with traveling outside of the city limits, so their costs do go up for the for the rural areas. There are some new fees, items that we previously either didn't charge for or had to large administrative costs to track and charge back. Now have standardized rates. We have some admin type fees. Items related to the solar garden. This isn't for production and billing of, but for people that want to change names on accounts, that type of thing. System improvement fees, I'll get to that later on. And again, over 400 amp metering fees. Those all have fees associated with them now that are sort of clearly laid out with definitions of what's included.
Can I just ask a quick question? How many houses now are asking for 400 amp service?
Don't have a number, but it is significantly increased over the last about 5 years. We have noticed a trend, a lot of newer houses with I guess larger houses, EV chargers. They're making provisions for HVAC, heat pumps, the likes of. I'd say we get a couple a month that are either upgrading to 400 amp or they're new builds and looking for 400 amp right off the start.
Wow. And can you make any comment on how our current infrastructure handles that increase in load demand? That's probably not your
Yeah, so
alleyway.
Jillian has been doing some work on this. We are seeing, it's a relatively short period to track it over, but we do have higher summer loads, which is likely indicative of folks moving towards AC and heat pumps that then have cooling capabilities. But we haven't noticed significant spikes in our winter loads. We did set a new peak record this year, but that's generally associated with the cold weather. And but if you take out the extremes, we haven't noticed a huge jump in demand, and some of that might be efficiency increases or people that are taking advantage of the heat pumps or getting off of baseboard heaters and getting to heat pumps, which are actually more efficient. So we have some folks going from gas, which are adding load, some people coming off baseboards, which is decreasing load.
Thank you.
But yeah, sort of the fear, we are trying to work with Fortis as well. They have also a much larger sample size of data to see what we can glean for what's the effect of EV chargers on a distribution system.
Great. Thank you.
And then there are provisions in the fees and charges to increase annually with the general rate increases. So it'll be indexed year over year. The current rates haven't changed since 2012.
Did you say what the UG incentive credit was?
That's the underground
Okay.
service fee. So we realize benefits as a utility for folks who bring their services in underground. So there is an incentive credit built into this one to help bring the cost closer to the cost of doing an overhead service, to help encourage new customers or people upgrading their services to drive them underground. Easy to service, and so it's a benefit to us, so we'd like to encourage that.
Okay. I'll follow up. I put my service underground.
AC on the first one, fixed fee for residential, actual cost for commercial and large residential. This is for new connections, setting up transformers, lines.
Generally, it's for new connections and upgrades.
Okay.
I guess I'd put, it says residential there, but it would be small commercial as well. 200 amps and less are sort of lumped into fixed fees. It's our larger commercial and residential. Commercial could be multi-unit or large service size. Folks that need
200 is our minimum, right? Like any new connection has to be at least 200. Is that not the standard?
Nope. People can still connect 60 amp services if they like. No one really does less than 100 these days, but we
Okay.
still get hundreds and 125s. 200 is generally the most common residential number.
If I can, do you think we find, when you're looking at the billing that's happening around those 200s, is there quite a variability between the cost to install, between the cheapest and the most expensive? Like how much do we lose with that fixed rate, or do we index that across the whole class? I hope
Yeah, so today they're quite out of line because we haven't modified it in a long time. The intent of the new fixed rates are we've done a breakdown of what does a standard job take, what linesmen, trucks, admin, travel time. In the city, we've allowed for 15 minutes of travel time. Out in the rural area, it's 45 minutes for a round trip.
Yeah.
We assigned our current billing rates to those items, and that's how we came up with the costs in the new bylaw.
So whether I would be out at Redfish or in the city for a 200 or less amp service, I would pay the same fee to get hooked up.
Not within the city or Redfish. All rural customers, whether you're in Balfour or 6 Mile,
They
same.
would be in one
Correct.
catchment, whether I was at 6 Mile or
Yep.
Redfish.
But if you're in Rosemont or Fairview, same price there.
Okay, and both of those would be fixed rates.
Correct.
Okay, and then if I move beyond 200, that's where it's just whatever it costs.
We
just bill you.
begin there's it's an administrative burden on us because we have to track those costs. We do have like a fixed rate for a 400 amp connection for residential, but anything on the commercial side that's becoming fixed. Actual cost, we'll track those.
Sorry, so what if large residential is 400 amps and we see only a few, like if I'm building a beautiful lake house out at 10 Mile,
Yep.
and am I going to end up paying the actual cost it takes to bring someone and make those connections, or am I paying a fixed rate that's being subsidized by everybody else?
You'd be paying a fixed rate. If you need a 400 amp service, again, this is all assuming that you're within 30 meters of our existing infrastructure, so we don't have to extend a line to you.
Sure.
Anyone looking for a 400 amp, it's more than the 200 amp rate to account for additional material costs and line size. It's more difficult to install. It's not. It has to be underground, so the line crew has to pull underground line. So the rate is higher. It's not necessarily being subsidized by other ratepayers. We've tried to come up with a rate that we believe is fair for a 400 amp service.
Okay. Thanks.
That's reflective of actual costs for our line crew to do that work.
Okay. Thanks, Casey.
So rates. The actual rate for electricity, that's separate and fixed in an annual review process. The service descriptions, this would be, who falls under small commercial, large commercial, residential, that type of thing. We've cleaned up our definitions there. We've made allowances for power factor. We haven't traditionally charged for power factor or poor power factor, namely. But we are moving towards that. So we've made some clarifications to the language. Our street light rates, we do still have fixed rate street lighting available. LEDs are now the standard, so they consume less electricity, so we've adjusted our rates accordingly. And we now have a rate in there for EV charging, which could be used. Currently, Nelson Hydro has 4 locations with EV chargers, and they provide power for free. There's no cost associated with those charging stations. This bylaw here would allow charging by the minute. The definition between landlord and tenant, we've had a lot of questions about this over the last couple of years, certainly since I've been here. Clarifications around security deposits from tenants have been laid out and defined. How long security deposits will be held, and then some language around our collections process. Probably the one that generates the most questions is when a tenant leaves and has an unpaid account, we do take measures to try to collect. Should those measures fail, that account ends up in the property owner's account, and if we still can't collect, the standard remedy is transfer to taxes at the end of the year. So there is language around all that, explaining that more explicitly, and part of the feedback we got from the Landlord-Tenant Association was around some means to collect versus where the security deposits came in.
Councillor Page.
So we've heard from the Landlord Society. What is the engagement been with the tenants union? Because the West Kootenay landlords don't represent tenants, they represent the landlords, right? I think is the organization you might have been referring to.
Okay. Yeah, yes, I believe that's when Scott was meeting.
Okay,
Scott
so
met
do we
with.
have we had an engagement with an association representing tenants?
I haven't. I'm not aware if Scott has or not.
Okay.
We certainly are encouraging folks to come out. We have a public engagement session on these bylaws. I believe it's on the 20th this month.
Okay.
We're trying to advertise that publicly, so we encourage people to come out.
Within our our customer management software, do we have a good sense of who the tenants versus the landlords are when we're emailing out on this engagement? Are we able to ask
Yes,
people
we-
specifically what they might like based on what category they might be in?
We're not, I wouldn't say we're doing targeting advertising of that nature, nope. We've just been advertising in general. Here are the bylaws, here's the date for public engagement, and we're not tailoring our message.
Maybe just, fair enough. So there's going to be an in-person, there's going to be a survey, an online component for the engagement, or just maybe lay out what the
Yes.
engagement will look like?
So it's a hybrid. I believe we might be hosting it here, but there's an in-person component with a option to virtually attend.
And that will just, only that open house will be the engagement?
Correct.
There won't be like a survey that, what do you think has changed?
So that'll be the only Form 1 before July, but all these bylaws do need to be reviewed by the BCUC.
Okay,
And we don't know what their engagement process is going to be yet. There is very likely to be a public engagement session there where the BCUC will open it up to the general public to make comments as well.
so just for my own clarity, the only public engagement we're going to have is an in-person with a virtual option during a set time?
Yes,
Okay,
before July. Then following that, there will be
and then
additional sessions.
that'll go to the BCUC and they'll
Who will have different requirements for public engagement over the next months. We don't expect this to be approved before, our hope is that we can get this through the BCUC before December 31st. So there'll likely be some engagement sessions over the next couple months.
So you've raised the question, so just so people know that are listening, or just to inform council, if you haven't seen it, so it's actually June the 20th, from 7 to 8:30. It will be hosted here in council chambers. And that's about the bylaws, but my understanding is that, if I'm not mistaken, Nelson Hydro is also doing a customer satisfaction survey that I think was just launched today, or it's going to be launched tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. But what you're talking about there in terms of feedback and talking about bylaws, that is June the 20th from 7 to 8:30 here in council chambers.
I just want to state, I think we need to have an online component. I think this should be a survey that goes out to all customers that they can fill out without having to come into an in-person. I think the in-person is great and valuable, but I think at least from then until July 1st or whatever timeline is appropriate, we need an online survey to go with these changes.
To go through the changes.
Well, as the public engagement component, that you don't have to come down here between 7 and 8:30 on June 20th as your only option to provide feedback on these changes.
So it is hybrid, right?
But that's, yeah, you can attend
It
online.
is a specific, okay.
Correct, so the recommendation is an opportunity for individuals to submit feedback in advance in
Yeah,
a written format.
yeah, that's what I would like to see. It's at least that there's an online component. There's you can get an email, fill out a survey, and give us your feedback that way. And that would go, to me, that would go to all customers.
Okay, we'll see, I'll take that back.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Tate.
I think that you might want to clarify what kind of feedback you're looking for, because we don't often get pre-feedback on bylaws. This
Yeah,
is different.
that's
This is a bit different, but like, I don't know if you want to clarify what kind of feedback you're looking for, like, because,
I would say that we would put out that these are bylaw changes we're looking to make. Whatever information we provide at the public open house on this would be the information we would condense into an online form, send out to the customers, and then ask them what they think about these changes, as we would do with any other public engagement
Of the six
of
changes?
these
yes?
bylaws. Yeah, like I get that we're also doing a customer experience survey, which is a common thing we're doing on a yearly basis. But these changes should let them know, hey, we're looking at changing these bylaws. This is the information, whatever information we provide on the landing page. Let us know your thoughts.
Okay, and we are doing some social media engagement to try to get people out to this event. Perhaps the missing component there is these slides, as well as all of the bylaw revisions, are available now in they're published for the council minutes, so they're publicly accessible.
Yep.
We have pointed people towards that.
Yeah.
So perhaps we could, if it's not already in there, we'll make sure to steer people towards the content added and make I guess we can consider a way to submit questions in advance, whether it's an email address or something of that nature.
Or just feedback. Like if I've read through the bylaws and I have feedback, that is something that can be sent in and incorporated in, regardless of whether you show up at the open house. Okay.
All right, new sections to the bylaws. Demand meters. This is back. It's always been in there, but just lacking clarity. So we are looking at charging for demand, which is an industry standard. Nelson Hydro itself pays demand charges to Fortis for the supply of electricity. So this is bringing it in line with what other utilities are doing. Independent power producers. We don't have many in our system, but folks are looking at larger and larger solar arrays or other ideas. So we have some language in there about folks who produce more power than is permitted under the essentially the solar array net metering program, which allows you to offset your own usage. Past your own usage, you fall into the IPP category. And net metering rate for power generation in excess. So language around all of that, as well as rates for excess power.
Councillor Payne.
So the technology is coming that people will be able to use battery storage in their electric vehicles, possibly. Is that terminology covered within the IPP? So if I'm generating more at a certain point of time, that I can now store in my vehicle battery. I'm
Yep.
not going to be an IPP. I'm just not putting back into the...
Yeah, so we don't do it on an instantaneous basis. You can offset
Okay,
your
gotcha.
usage.
That's fine. That covers that. Thank you.
Okay.
Got it.
Clarifications, this is sort of a big one that there was a lot of ambiguity about, and we've got internal policies which we're looking to formalize. This is around service extensions, line sharing, and system improvements. So this is generally for our larger customers who may need extra infrastructure built to get to their property. Perhaps they have a very large load and we need to upgrade upstream improvements, or even at a substation, perhaps we need to upgrade our equipment there. Some provisions of how we determine when these additional charges are applicable. The Solar Garden program, it's always been there, but how we formalized sections of the Solar Garden program. Minor change for commercial customers. We're going to require that they all provide us with the schematics of their systems, and those also need to be posted in their electrical room. And clarifications around standardization of designs. We do have design guidelines. A lot of the contractors are aware of what our current requirements are, but we're looking to formalize these in the bylaws as well. A lot of this has to do with making it easier for us to service our customers with single points of connection where possible. And that's the end of the summary. I'm not sure if anyone else had a chance to review all 50 pages of our updated bylaws there, but we're looking for feedback. If anyone does have questions, there will be the chance to engage with us further. And for now, we're only looking for, I guess, council's support to move forward with the process of engaging with the public, finalizing a version of these bylaws to bring back to council in the July session. For, I believe it's the first reading. No, third reading?
First three.
First three readings. But the intent is not to implement the new bylaws until they've received approval from the BCUC as well. We'd like to implement the new bylaws for all customers at this one time, so we're not operating under two different bylaws simultaneously.
I just like, Councilor Woodward.
I was just gonna move the recommendation.
Oh, okay. I just want, before you do that, I mean, I just want to say, thank you for the presentation, and I just, I realize that Councillor Page has asked for, that more has to be done about public engagement or a survey, and my only caution in that, and I'm just going to leave it with staff to figure out whether or not it can be accomplished in some manner, what he's asking for, is the fact that these bylaws are complicated, and they contain a lot of language that I'm not sure, it might lend itself to a survey if you were sending it to the utility in Summerland or in Penticton. But when what's a demand meter? What's net metering? What's a power factor? When I look at some of the words that come up in this, is that I know that I can read through it, and I've sat through enough of hydro over, 15 years on council listening to hydro presentations. I've got a pretty good idea about what some of these words mean. But to ask for a general survey for feedback on the bylaw, I hear your concern that as a renter, that renters haven't been engaged in this process. And is that really the specific question that you'd like to see answered, is that not only were landlords approached, but that renters were approached? Because that does have value. But I think a survey, this is difficult work to get through if this isn't your background. And I just don't know what kind of feedback that a person would get, and whether or not it's really what you're looking for at the end of the day. It's just my own cautionary thoughts on it. I think the fact that being online or coming in person, if you have concerns about this, allows you to ask for the definitions and some more sort of working examples of what these things are. So otherwise, I just really want to thank you for that. This is a long time coming. It's been needed. BCUC, we're doing this. We need to get it done. We need to get it passed, and then BCUC could sit on it, and it could be 2027 before we get that change the bylaw. So let's just be honest about BCUC and the time it takes to get things through that organization. So we're not going to see these potentially come back. I mean, it would be great if they were back, and then we could apply them when we're looking at, if they had any implications for rate changes or anything like that, that we would be looking at that in probably the 2025 round of discussions that would be setting 2026 rates. I mean, this process takes a long time. So, Councillor Page.
Thanks. And I agree, quite frankly, I agree with the mayor. I think where I kind of ended up in a quagmire is like between the 20th and the 1st, there's not a lot of time. I think ideally you'd have a public engagement that would be recorded and posted, and then you would just basically open up an opportunity for feedback, generalized feedback. You've had the materials, you've had the recording of the open house. What thoughts do you want to send in? Would just be what I would look for. It's the ability to have those thoughts sent in before or outside of that 90-minute window that was in person. Because of course people think of things, you educate yourself, you review, and then maybe you send in some thoughts, or you and some friends send in some thoughts. I just didn't seem realistic to do that between the 20th and the 1st and still be able to compile it and send it off. But perhaps I'm making presumptions. My real piece would be the ability for people to send some note, a paragraph or two, a page or two. Some of our residents we know would send many, many pages. And they would thoroughly
Well, they'll also, some of those will probably be at the meeting too.
Yeah.
just a couple of points to make. I know Scott has met with some tenants. I just don't know which association specifically.
Yeah.
So there has been some engagement there. The messaging has been getting on social media. There have been some tenants in particular who've reached out asking for more information. But at the very least, we'll make sure that there is a email address available. Even during the presentation at the end of it.
Okay.
Similar to this one, we'll make sure that anyone who has thoughts or is watching the recording
Yep.
has an opportunity to get their opinions in
Okay.
for consideration.
That's really all I need
Okay.
to hear from that. Okay.
And don't forget, like, I believe that there is a post on the Instagram or Facebook. I don't follow social media, but I know that you've done some posts, because you guys normally do have posts out there.
Yeah.
That, just to remind people, if you are a social media user, you can always, what do you, boost it, send it, share it,
Forward it.
forward it, to make sure that your followers get the information as well.
Okay. Great.
Question, okay,
I just have
do you have a
one
quick question? Want to do the
quick
question
question,
first?
if that's okay. You mentioned at the very beginning that this hadn't been done since 2012, I believe, and indicated that was a long period to not update it. Is there a best practices? Like, when should this be done again if you were on a schedule that is optimal for maintaining the current information? And if that's not something that is out there, because I know there are relatively few.
Yeah, I guess we got to try to future-proof a bit by having escalation amounts so that rates progress. We shouldn't need to do a major revamp of this nature. I would hope that every 3 to 5 years we could do a minor update. There are always clarifications that can be made, or perhaps changes to how we want to approach different subjects.
Okay,
I would say every 3 to
that's sort
5
of all I
years
was looking
would
for.
be like what I'd like to see, but in a much smaller rewrite, just minor changes as opposed to this.
Like, our guidelines were to do an OCP every 10 years, and now the government is saying we need to do every 5 years, so that's
There's no
a
government,
shift.
no,
No.
yeah,
Yeah.
no rules around it, but we do want to keep it current and make sure that it's consistent with how we're dealing with the customers.
Perfect, thank you.
I think now that we have the COSA behind us, if I should be so brave as to say that, that took up a lot of staff time at Nelson Hydro, along with our regulatory and legislative staff within the city. And so hopefully, with that behind us, we'll be able to do these bylaw catch-ups and other bits of housekeeping that may have had to be put aside while we did that work. And hopefully, with this work, BCUC will be responsive and give us the go-ahead in
And
a timely fashion.
And where we can, we do look a lot to Fortis and BC Hydro, who are the large utilities. BCUC is familiar with their practices, so in many situations we've independently derived what we think is right, but compared it back to the standards to make sure we're following industry standard for most of these items.
Okay, so I really want to thank you for your time here, and I believe Councillor Woodward wants to move the motion.
Move.
And is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Tate.
Shall I read it?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you very much. That council directs staff to continue with hydro service bylaw updates and collect input from the public, and then subsequently initiate the bylaw adoption process with council.
Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? And that carries. So once again, Casey, thank you, and enjoy your evening.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Casey.
Thanks for your time, and enjoy the rest of the meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Council, if
Casey.
I could have a motion to adjourn for dinner. Moved by Councillor Lockenberg, seconded by Councillor Page. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you.
That wait 2 years or go to.
I'm gonna wait 2 years. I think I'm gonna get back on the list for my other one. Because I think 2 years from now, I'll be
Janice, I may
ready.
have to slip out for 5 seconds.
But I don't need to, I'm doing okay right now. I'm hitting 13,000
Wait, what point?
steps
Like
a
you
day.
have, like you're in
Just-
conflict
no,
or?
no, just go to the bathroom.
Oh, I know, that's what I just like, I had to go, I
Light
thought, yeah. Okay.
Oh, my.
I think I had a good tour.
We're live?
So I have to hang up now. Okay, bye.
Thank you, everybody. And welcome back. If I could have a motion to reconvene.
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor Tate, seconded by Councillor Woodward. All those in favor of reconvening? And that carries. Council, we're on item 8, and we don't have a report from the city manager. And item number 9 is council reports, and I would like to ask the indulgence of council if this week we could bypass council reports. We have a very heavy agenda, so if we could move on, if that's okay with council. Okay, everybody's giving me the signal that's okay. So then,
Can I just do a public service announcements instead for the OCP? No? You're gonna do it?
sure, go right ahead.
Just very briefly, there was the first public engagement for the OCP process at Hume School, well, one of the first in this segment, at Hume School, and it was reasonably well attended. So that was great to have the opportunity to have all the staff there with all the material. But I would just encourage everyone to take a look at the website or any of the information that is spread far and wide, because this is your opportunity to get out there and help determine what our community looks like in the future. Your voice and your opinions and your thoughts are really welcomed at this point in time to create and formalize that as we go forward, to open up those conversations with friends, neighbors, and anyone else whom you think may be interested. So please check it out. Many, many ways to engage.
And there are 2 more open houses coming up this month, so there will be
market.
further opportunities.
The market this weekend.
And the market, yeah, Wednesday and
And many
and
weekends.
Saturday.
Yes.
So, moving on then to item 10, requests. And now I asked to get moved ahead, and I'm out of thing here. So, request number 11A, Sinixt Canoe Journey Working Group request. The local Sinixt Canoe Journey Nelson Stop Working Group has formed in order to support the Sinixt Upper Columbia Canoe Journey Salmon Ceremony and Language Camp, which will take place in June of 2024. The working group is requesting a $3,000 donation that would support coordination and implementation of the event. So, council, you have a summary document there in front of you, and there is a recommendation, and whether or not council wants to pass that recommendation or look at other options.
I'll move to discuss.
Okay, so,
Bring the recommendation.
and then is there, well,
Well, I guess I'll move, but I would like to
yeah, discuss
Discuss.
it. Is there a seconder? Thank you. Do you want to read the motion, please? Thank you, Councilor Woodward.
that the council not approve the request from the Sinixt Canoe Journey Nelson Stop Working Group to provide funding in the amount of $3,000 for the June 2024 Sinixt Upper Columbia Canoe Journey and associated events.
Thank you. As a mover.
So I would actually like this to read that we do approve, and part of my reasoning is that this is what I would consider part of Truth and Reconciliation. And I actually was thinking that, maybe because part of the reason that staff is denying this is that we don't have a line item, but that maybe we do need a Truth and Reconciliation budget line item that we can work with in our budgetary process. I'm not saying, of course, that it's going to be immediate, but I think it would be something to consider for the next budget cycle, that we would actually have some money to work with for these kind of requests.
And I think that's the whole issue here is, I think it's just to have the information out there that unlike the regional district of Central Kootenai that has discretionary funds, we don't have a discretionary fund pot here at the City of Nelson. And that I have talked to one of the members of the working group about applying actually for a READY grant, which is one of the granting things that, it is the only granting pot that we have here in the city. The fact that we could have money set aside for as discretionary can obviously be a discussion for a next budget cycle. So, and you can see, I think, in the options and alternatives there that about they put in the SIP grant, but I think they really meant to write the READY grant process. And one of their grant writers has told me that they will be next year for sure applying through that process. They felt that it was, because I don't know exactly the date, and I said, well, it's always in June. And we don't, there's lots of things that apply for READY grants that don't have dates and time stamped on them as to when the money will be spent. And in some years, we've even offered READY grant applicants carryover due to issues with their programming. So, and that's part of it. It's just to have the discussion out there that we don't have that, that funding out there.
So I guess I'm just trying to say, I would like to see this funding go through for them, and that next year we formalize it so that we have some kind of budget to work with these kind of requests, specifically around truth and reconciliation work. Thank you.
So do I hear somebody make an amendment to this motion?
Well, that would change the intent.
Yeah, I think we'd have to put it down.
Okay, so do you want to defeat it? Okay.
Not necessarily.
Okay. Councillor Lockenberg.
It should be approved, and then you can do another one because it's not approved.
Right. So I mean, so we need to,
Carry it to not approve it, and then do another motion to approve it.
Why don't we just
It's just the way it's worded.
So we have to, if you want to do
Backwards.
that.
Not approved
Yeah.
request. That's what's written in there.
right, would we not just vote no?
If you vote no, well, you could vote no,
Then we'd have to,
but then
You still have to have another,
Yeah.
yeah, that's why I was asking whether or
Yeah.
not somebody wanted to amend it, but Councillor Lockenberg.
I'm actually, in my understanding, the recommendation from staff to not approve the request makes a lot of sense to me. Like going through this SIP grant funding cycle makes sense. I'd be okay to have a line item, but I think there's other things we could do as a city to advance truth and reconciliation that would actually be very much in line with what is being asked here. And that's with our new peer, we're providing, we can, provide special access through the peer. Obviously, that's going to take staff time to support some of that. So I think there's like in-kind contributions in terms of supporting the event that we can offer and likely would offer anyways, that does, I think, is meaningful. And then in time we can explore things like we've talked about before. The shelter for the Ladybird might, as we consider, what we're doing with that, then maybe there's an opportunity to offer that on a part-time basis as a storage for their canoes, etc. But it does, to me, make sense that we work within the grant funding system that we have today, and then support this event with staff time and access to the pier and so forth.
Councillor Payne.
So the primary objection is that we don't have the amount budgeted. So how did we pay for it last year? So we did support this event for the same amount last year. And at that time, was this group directed to the READY grant process?
Well, you were at the table, Councillor Payne, and so I'm thinking that,
I'm trying to remember.
yeah,
I can't.
that we did find the money to do this, and whether or not, what I can't tell you is whether or not the discussion entailed also the READY grant. I'd imagine that this probably pretty much is the same. For matter of fact, I have last year's sitting on my desk. I could go and look at it, and might have said that one of the options was to redirect to the SIP or Ready Grant program.
Okay, because I know we have some very savvy individuals on that working group, so if that was the case, I'm trying to understand why they wouldn't have followed through with that. But since they got money last year, it seems natural to me. I think they've asked for all the same groups for similar funding to put on this event, which I think is pretty significantly important, especially during Indigenous History Month. So I do support this funding for $3,000.
Councillor Page.
I'll be voting to defeat this, and I will support a resolution to support the $3,000 ask this year. I think we've already heard. I would be strong with my wording about moving to the SIPs, but I would go a bit further. If we're going to carve out a line item, maybe we carve out a line item in the Ready Grant. Sorry, everyone else says SIPs, but in the Ready Grants. We do the 25% already for arts and culture. Maybe there's a component where we say 10% is earmarked on a first come first serve for Indigenous reconciliation work that comes forward. As a framework for that, and if that's something amicable to the group, then we could say that in the letter. That because I think I'm guessing because we don't have the proponent here to ask specifically, but I'm guessing that part of the ask this way is about creating a space specifically for this kind of Indigenous truth and reconciliation work versus grouping it all in with everybody else.
It's hard to say. So I think you're asking for something that isn't germane, particularly to this motion right now in terms of whether or not we change how we do the Ready Grant process. So that's a whole different discussion about parsing out a portion of it.
Yeah.
Perhaps we can leave that to budget time, although it's not a budgetary item for the city of Nelson, but so some contemplation when we start going into that process again for next year. Does anybody else have any comments about the current recommendation? Okay, the recommendation has been moved and seconded. And all those in favor of the recommendation? All those opposed? And so that resolution fails. So if I could have somebody put forward another resolution? Councillor Page.
So the same resolution without the not, that we approve it. Sorry, I've lost my sheet.
Okay.
I'll just read it, Councillor Page. The council approve the request for the Sinixt Canoe Journey Nelson Stop Working Group to provide funding for the amount of $3,000 for the June 2024 Sinixt Upper Columbia Canoe Journey and associated events.
Okay, that's been moved, and I take it you're seconding it, Councillor Woodward. Yep. And any further discussion on that, Council? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries. Thank you, Council.
I have a question, Madam Mayor. Can you give me like a 2 or 3 sentence historical understanding of why we do not have discretionary funds? Because I think other city councils do, from my understanding.
Can't tell you that, Councillor Tate. I'd have to ask the CAO. Maybe
Can I speak to it?
Sarah can tell us.
We don't have a grant and aid policy. That's why. So I'm not sure why we don't have one. I know that because the SIP or the Ready Grants, as they're now called, came into play. So the grant and aid policy was removed in the hopes that each organization that was requesting funding would go through the process of the Ready Grant.
Okay.
Okay.
Councillor Payne.
So that would remove the possibility of funding opportunities that come along outside of the granting cycle. So is it something that we could reinstitute in a different format for situations like this? Just considering.
Councillor Lockenberg.
My opinion is like council can do whatever it wants. We have in the past, but I think it's really important that we do have a policy if we're going to go down the road of doing these grants on an ad hoc basis. It would be probably a useful exercise to see, like, because we do have some kind of earmarked grants, like our housing affordability pool. There might be, I think there's some flexibility related to climate change. There's often some things we might do there to meet our Nelson Next targets, but nothing's official as far as I understand outside of the housing fund. So if council or if a councillor wanted to put forward that, I mean, I think that's something to talk to staff about, eventually adding it to some future meeting for discussion, perhaps at a committee of the whole, creating space for that discussion, or a workshop perhaps.
Yeah, I think a workshop.
Workshop would be probably
Yeah.
better. I guess part of the thing about the discretionary, I mean, we could have a policy, but then the beauty in some respects of the Ready Grant program, it does allow everybody to have a date, know the date, and get their stuff done, instead of going, oh, I forgot, but you know what, we can just drop in 2 weeks' time. And I think it just helps streamline for staff. I mean, it's a lot of work for staff, it's a lot of work for council to go through the Ready Grant application, but I think there was probably some logic that was behind doing that, in terms of not having at every council meeting, potentially having somebody coming and asking for $1,000 here or $5,000 there. And
Right. Well, and sorry if I may, just a supplemental on that, it just occurs to me that if council did want to make more money available for future grants, it could top up the Ready Grant, so you leverage that process. Again, you standardize it so it's all clear, and then if we wanted, we could just add to it, as opposed to then creating a separate fund or separate process.
And that's why I think having a workshop or something along that line, but I think there was some logic into why something might have been on the books in the far past that isn't there anymore. But Councillor Woodward.
I would just say that for this situation, I think we should tell this group again very clearly that next
I have
year.
told the grant writer that yesterday,
Okay.
in fact.
Thank you.
Is they in the room? No,
No.
they're not. But, and they said that would be definitely
Happens.
happening, so,
Thank you.
yeah. Okay, did we pass that?
Yes.
Yes, we did pass it, yes.
We passed something else.
Yeah. And, okay, moving on to 11B. So the Nelson District Arts Council mural location request. The Nelson District Arts Council has requested that council allow a mural to be painted on city-owned property. Council is now requested to approve or deny the use of the city-owned sites for the proposed designs.
Move. Sorry.
Okay. Moved by Lockenberg, seconded by Woodward. Councillor Lockenberg, if you don't mind.
Yeah. I have to scroll all the way back up. The council approves the use of the south-facing wall of the Nelson District Youth Center located at 608 Lake Street for the mural proposed by the Nelson District Arts Council and designed by artist Madeline Tetro. Got that right?
Yeah, you did get that right.
I've never
You did
pronounced
indeed.
Madeline's last name.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of exciting, so we'll
Yeah.
all come clean and say that Madeline Tetrow
Very
is actually an
exciting.
employee of the city of Nelson, who happens to be a fantastic artist. So this is gonna be exciting, I think she's probably very excited about the potential, so.
Oh, her
Yeah.
work looks really impressive.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you, councillors. Item 11C, Development Variance Permit, 91 Baker Street. So Development Services has received a Development Variance Permit application for 91 Baker Street to decrease the required amenity area from a minimum 850 square meters to 327 square meters, given the rooftop amenity area. Decrease the required front setback from the minimum 1.5 meters to 0 in order to provide parking at the rear of the building, accommodating access to the CPKC rail yard, allowing for a greater buffer between the building and the rail yard, and increase the maximum height from 20 meters to 21.1 meters in order to accommodate the concrete commercial podium with a prefabricated residential design above. Council is being requested to approve the variances. We have city staff in the room to perhaps give us a preamble, and then we can look at doing some motions. So over to Natalie and Tara.
Okay. All right. So, as the mayor already mentioned, this variant permit application is for 91 Baker Street. The proposal is for purpose-built workforce housing development, and it is a rapid build project in partnership with BC Builds. The site is located in Railtown, adjacent to the Chamber of Commerce and within walking distance to Cottonwood Falls Park. The applicant is proposing a 6-story mixed-use building that will feature a concrete podium with 2 commercial units and parking. Above the podium, a 5-story prefabricated modular design with 55 residential units is proposed. This development meets the OCP's objective to encourage affordable multi-unit housing in areas without steep slopes and within reasonable walking distance of services such as commercial areas and parks. This proposal is seeking 3 variances. First, the rooftop amenity area is below the required minimum. 327 square meters is proposed, and a minimum of 850 square meters is required. The impact of a smaller amenity area is mitigated by the site's walkable proximity to Cottonwood Falls Park, and also a public amenity space at the Chamber of Commerce. Second, the required front setback is below the required minimum. 0 meters is proposed, and a minimum of 1.5 meters is required. The impact of a 0-meter front setback is a concession for the increase in rear setback, which is best practice for residential uses in proximity to rail operations. Also, had there been a rear lane, the minimum front setback would have been 0 meters. And in this proposal, it accommodates CP access in the rear, which acts as a rear lane. Lastly, the height is above the required maximum. 21.1 meters is proposed, and the maximum of 20 meters is required. The increase in height is to allow for taller commercial spaces in the podium while accommodating the prefabricated residential design above. Taller commercial spaces are aligned with the OCP design guidelines and is best practice for a commercial street. Approval of these variances will not affect approval of the final development permit. All outstanding information will need to be provided and satisfy municipal and provincial requirements. Bringing the variances forward at this time is staff working in good faith with the applicant to remove process barriers for purpose workforce-built housing. That concludes my presentation.
Questions? Councillor Page.
Thank you for bringing this forward. This seems like a great project to add to our Railtown district and get things kicked off down there and bring on some really necessary workforce housing. I'm curious in the decrease of the amenity area. Through the report, it seems the primary objective of the amenity area is in service of the residents of that particular building. It would be my interpretation that amenity areas serve a dual purpose in terms of both making sure that the space is livable for the residents, but also that there are additional amenities and integrations with the public realm. And so has it been discussed with have there been opportunities to look at maybe expanding or investing in some of the amenity areas, either on site or towards Cottonwood Falls, to increase the amenity of the public realm?
The site is pretty constrained. The rooftop amenity area, talking with the architect, if they're constrained by like mechanical features on the roof. And then if they were to go beyond what they are proposing, they would require a second stairwell. And then that would affect the whole design and decrease the amount of residential units.
Can I just, for clarity, specifically I was thinking when you look at Cottonwood Creek, you've got the green space on 91 Baker, the whole property, not the property, not the footprint of the building, but there's a green space there. You could potentially see taking some of that parking away and expanding that green space beside the creek as a way of achieving additional square footage of amenity versus because the other thing is these rooftop amenity is not accessible to the public. It doesn't provide the public with any additional amenity.
Right. I guess the required amenity space is for the residents. Yeah. As for like the site itself, they are planning on subdividing. Natalie, do you want to talk?
Yeah, I think the amenity space is mostly for the residents to make it more livable for them. I think it's just a kind of, we want developers to consider that and factor that into their designs. I think in this case, they're working with a very constrained site and they're doing the best that they can. And I think given the proximity, the like location close to downtown and Cottonwood Creek, I think it's a good compromise. And it would be a great project to see down there, even with the limited amenity space.
So just one last supplement.
Yeah.
So is that definition of how we view amenity, that's our definition? Is that how we're looking at it? Or is that a policy conversation we need to be having?
Yeah, the way that I read our bylaws, the way that I interpret, it kind of talks about it in the OCP too. It's just to provide amenity space for the residents. Off-site improvements are another conversation, and those, the province has just come out with more regulations that can, add costs onto development so that they can contribute to the community, like the community at large, and I think that's what you're getting to.
Yeah.
The province has expanded our powers, and eventually I'd like to look at, getting a bylaw like that in place.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Lockwood?
Unless I've missed it, there's no information about the size of the units. Do we have a sense of what workforce housing looks like? Is it traditional sort of studio apartments, for example, or do we have any idea?
Last I checked, wasn't it a mix of unit sizes?
I thought it was
Yeah, I believe it's a mix of
one
units.
bedrooms and 2 bedrooms.
Yeah, I think they had a mix of unit sizes. I don't have that information offhand. I apologize for that, but I could follow up afterwards. I think it's a mix. It's not like standard single occupancy rooms. Yeah.
Okay. I love the project. I'm really in support of it. I think it's what we need there. And I'm just interested in being potentially a little more creative with the mix or the sizing, because it could be smaller units, a mix that might be really attractive and more affordable, and then bigger. So yeah, it's great. Really excited to see it.
Councillors, other questions? Councillor Payne.
Yeah, I guess my concern with the, is with the amenity space as well. So maybe I need a better understanding so the bylaw currently based on the square footage, is that how we get to the 850 square meters? Is it always a certain percentage that's calculated?
It's based on number of bedrooms.
Yeah.
Okay. So then, well, we have 55 units, and yeah, when I read this mixed use, I thought that just meant commercial and residential. I didn't understand that it meant mixed sizes, because the share building is pretty consistently 1 bedrooms, yeah.
Yeah, so I just have it here. So there's studio, 1 bedrooms, and 2 bedrooms.
Okay.
Okay.
10 studios, 31 bedrooms, 15 2 bedrooms.
Great, that sounds great. Yeah, I love the project. I'm always concerned that we have that mix of amenity space that we've discussed, I think, at length when the province's legislation came in around how many homes we can put on a single lot within the city. So I'm not sure that this should be any different. And I do understand the proximity to Cottonwood and town and all of those other things, but I like the idea that Councillor Page has brought forward about that area along the creek and how that could somehow, even though it's being subdivided, I get that. And so that property then would own right up to the creek, or is there, does the city own along the creek somehow?
Actually, I think in this case, the rail yard, I think they've changed the name.
really?
They own along the creek there.
Oh,
It's kind of a bit of an
interesting. I learn
anomaly
more
in the
and more.
city.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So that was my concern. Yeah, and it would be great. I'm sure you have it, but it was hard for me to understand. I went and looked at the site. It was hard for me to understand. We don't have we have, well, maybe this is it, but the red line on the photo we have looks like the lot, it's the site. So it would be helpful for me to see where the building is on that, or am I not understand the app properly. I see the subject property and then the site as subdivided, but I don't see how the property is sitting on there. And I do understand it's a constrained site, so I'm sure that it's 0 in the front and not much in the back.
Yeah, and in the back is that access.
Are they-
for the-
And so they both have a 0.
No. So there is a guidelines document for development in proximity to rail operations.
Yep.
And it does require a decent setback from the rail operations. So I think having it closer to the front, they're getting a greater setback. So it is quite a bit of parking and then that access to the rail yard in the back.
And how much parking will the building have? And is it just underneath the building on the north side then? Or?
It does
Oh,
have
there's a
some
few
drive
spots in the
under
front.
parking, and then it has parking along the back. Yeah, it meets the required parking, although I don't know the exact parking number.
So it meets the required parking for 55 units?
Yeah, but because downtown, they also get the 50%
Great, thank
discount.
you.
Yeah, it's 25 stalls, 7 stalls with level 2 charging.
Wow, nice.
Further questions, Councillor Payne?
Just really quickly, I did read, I went back to the SNAP and it said that this area was suitable for, was brownfield suitable for commercial, but that's changed in this case then, or is it okay because commercial's on the bottom?
Yeah, generally, I mean,
Commercial is appropriate, residential is not.
and it depends on.
But this is still a brownfield, isn't it? It's been
Yeah,
a
all-
remediated brownfield? Yeah.
No, sorry, it has not been remediated yet.
Okay.
They are working through that process as we speak, and so that's what we talked a little bit about in the report.
Okay.
And we won't be able to issue development permits until we have an approval in principle or some kind of release in place from the province. But whatever, level of remediation this project does get will determine the land use on the ground floor.
Right.
Commercial on the ground floor requires less remediation than residential or park.
And my last question is about the floodplain. Is it on the floodplain?
Yes, it is on the floodplain. They will be getting a development permit for that, and they're aware of those
Perfect.
sort of development constraints as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, great project. Just amazing. Can't wait to
Councillor
see it.
Page?
happen.
If you're okay with it, I would move the motion.
Okay. And is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Woodward. Councillor Page, we haven't heard your voice very much tonight, so I'll let you read the resolution.
I don't know how cheeky you're being about that, but that the application for the development variance permit to vary the requirements of zoning bylaw 3199/2013 for the purpose of constructing a 55-unit mixed-use building approved for Lot 1, District Lot 95, Kootenai Land District, NEP 9090791 Baker Street, as per the attached plans as follows, and it does follow within your agenda. So moved.
Okay. So that's been moved and seconded.
Do we have to vote separately, or is it a block?
It's a block.
Okay, thank you.
So, seeing no further questions, all those in favor of the recommendation? Okay, those opposed?
Get it done.
Were you an in or an out?
No, I was a late in.
Okay,
I'm
thank
sorry.
you. Thank you.
I'm still looking
Okay.
for information that I
So,
didn't understand.
There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you, councillors.
Thank you.
And that's
for-
approved. Okay, moving on to 11D. Development variance permit for 920 Lakeside Drive. Development Services has received a development variance permit application for 920 Lakeside Drive to increase the maximum building height from 14 meters to 15.7 meters as specified in the zoning bylaw. The variance is requested to facilitate the construction of a 57-unit mixed-use building. Council is being requested to approve the variance. And we have city staff here again to run us through this project. bring us up to date. So over to you, Natalie.
Yes, like the mayor said, the applicant is proposing to construct a 57-unit mixed-use building with 6 commercial units at grade. The development will include a range of unit types from studio all the way to 2-bedroom plus den. As part of this project, the applicant has requested to increase the maximum height from 14 meters to 15.7. Of that height increase, 0.5 meters of this request is due to the grade change between Simpson Road and Lakeside Drive. Lakeside Drive is actually a little bit lower. The remaining height increase is due to roofline features. I'll note that the OCP design guidelines encourage expressive and sculptural roof forms. Staff feel that the features add to the overall building character and aesthetic appeal. Overall, this variance is minor and supports an interesting roof line that accommodates site features, and as such, staff support the variance request.
Councillor Lockenberg?
I'll move the motion.
I'll second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded, and I only have one question. I'm taking it that 15.7 is still well under the flight path. Whoa.
It is under the flight path. Previously, this property was zoned to 16.75 meters, and the applicant has provided like a flight path analysis, and we've looked at it and confirmed that it's under the height restrictions.
Right. Okay, perfect. Councillor Page.
I'm noticing within, having reviewed this one of the features I'm not really seeing is a lot of trees or green space being added in. I see the parking, I see the addition of an interesting sight line, but I don't see the opportunity for trees being added to this property.
Yep, there is quite a bit of vegetation along the Walmart property or the mall property. And then as part of this development, it's partially on this phase and partially on the other phase. They've actually put in a playground structure at the back. Okay. And it might not show on the plans that you have. So there is going to be green space and amenity areas for this development.
Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm imagining there'll have to be pile driving again, yes?
Yes.
Yes, for this. It's all the same materials.
It's all the same materials, and I've let the applicant thinks that he might be able to do that without shutting down the airport this time, because we had to close that. So he'll look into that and let us know. If not, we'll have to accommodate the airport users again.
And supplemental?
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. Would the amount of pile driving be similar to what, I guess it would be similar to what was done before because the buildings are the same length? I would imagine it. Don't know. Okay.
I'm sorry, I cannot answer that. I don't know.
Okay. Just in terms of how long it took to pile drive, just so the public knows. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Councillor Tate.
I have a curiosity, thank you. I have a curiosity about the water runoff from rain, because right now that's dirt and it's going to be rooftop and concrete, and it's at a low part in the city. So I was curious about our sewer infrastructure and getting that water out of that area.
Storm sewer infrastructure.
Yeah.
Yep. The development, mostly for the first phase of this project, we're working on the townhomes. We had to figure out the servicing for the whole site. So this development generally complies with our subdivision and development servicing bylaw, which does have stormwater requirements and was reviewed by our consultants at Urban Systems to make sure for compliance. All of the stormwater would be captured and filtered and put into the lake, and they got approvals to do that.
Oh, it's not going out the force main?
Are you talking about stormwater?
Stormwater, yeah. Isn't stormwater, doesn't it go in, it's separated there?
Stormwater goes into the lake generally.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
great.
New stuff is separated.
It is.
Old stuff is, there's stuff from old buildings that's still tied in. That's why we hear about it.
This is my question.
Oh, okay, sorry, yes, no, it's not best practice to put storm into sewer anymore, so we do not do that, especially, for new infrastructure and some existing infrastructure, that happens.
Okay, great, thanks.
Councillor Page.
Just because it's not on our schematics, but it is in the renderings, the playground structure.
Yeah,
One of
I
the
see it now.
features I'm looking at, and we had talked about this when the first phase had come through. I've seen a lot of fencing, and we had talked a lot about people being able to come down the sidewalk, walk through the development, use the sidewalks internally and navigate, but it wouldn't just be a block between there and the waterfront. Are we still aiming for that? that we're creating pedestrian pathways through the neighborhood?
I don't think there's pedestrian pathways through the neighborhood. There's pedestrian, but the developer has added a new sidewalk on Lakeside Drive as well as Cedar Street that would connect through. There will be some fencing in there to kind of buffer between sort of backyard space.
Yeah.
I don't think that, this development's intending to keep people out fully, but again, it would be like a strata development, so whether or not the strata wants people walking through there or not is kind of up to the strata. Some are more private than others. Yeah, but no, I think it's going to be a great improvement down there. You're going to get 2 new sidewalks and 2 new connections, and then also the waterfront pathway that we're working on.
Yeah.
Councillors, any further questions? Somebody like to move the recommendation?
Move.
Moved by Councillor Woodward. Is there a seconder? Councillor Lockenberg. Councillor Woodward.
I think we already moved in
Oh.
second.
Oh, did we?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. Because sometimes we have this little discussion after we've moved a second and passed something, and then I get kind of a little bit confused.
Double
as to where
move.
everything-
It's double move.
Okay, there we go.
Double down on the
So, Councillor Woodward, read it out so we all
Sure.
know what we're doing here. Thank you.
That the application for development variance permit to vary the requirements of zoning bylaw 3199/2013 for the purpose of constructing a 57-unit mixed-use building approved for Lot B District lots 4085, 4236, 4645, and 6004, Kootenai District Plan EP 128577, 920 Lakeside Drive, as per the attached plans as follows, and then the zoning bylaw there. And is to increase the maximum building height from 14 meters to 15.7 meters as per the attached plans.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. I think everybody's had all their questions answered. Going once, going twice, 3 times. All those in favor of the motion? And that carries. Thank you, council. Okay, moving on to 11E, temporary use permit application renewal. Ward Engineering and Land Surveying Limited, on behalf of Western Pacific Marine Limited, has applied to renew the temporary use permit issued in July 2021 for the continued construction of the new Kootenai Lake Ferry. Council is requested to pass a resolution to renew this temporary use permit for the ferry's construction. There's a bit of information there.
Move.
Councilor Woodward moving, Councilor Lockenberg seconding. Any discussion, council? Okay, seeing none. Councilor Woodward, you moved it, if you would like to read it.
The council approved the temporary use permit file 2400602 to allow Western Pacific Marine Limited to complete the construction of the Kootenai Lake Ferry on the following properties. And then there's quite a few property PIDs there, and Crown Parcel Identified 2, District Lot 4280, Kootenai Land, District Accept Plan NEP 20485. That's it.
Okay, so that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or concerns, council? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries. Moving on to item 11F. Development Services has received requests from Sharon Nelson and Nelson Cares for $5,000 each from the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund. These funds will support pre-development work at 1306 and 1308 Fell Street for Sharon Nelson and 818 to 824 Front Street for Nelson Cares. The goal is to assess the feasibility and scale of potential workforce housing below market housing projects. Council is asked to approve these funding requests. There's some background there for everybody, and that I think we can do these together. Yeah. So we have recommendation there. Seven mover, Councillor Page.
I'm going to ask for division.
Okay.
They're very different. I've got something to say about the second one.
Okay. So division is fine. So Councillor Page, would you like to then move recommendation number 1?
The council provide $5,000 in financial support from the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund to Sharon Nelson to support the pre-feasibility study of 1306 and 1308 Fell Street, subject to the application being supported by the Housing Committee.
Okay, well, that was supported by the Housing Committee because I chaired that Housing Committee meeting and it was unanimous, the support for the,
Oh, so the subject to is only in reference, just because there was division, I wasn't sure if the
yeah,
subject to
yeah,
is
no, I
Then-
chaired that meeting and I
then
made sure that we had in the minutes recorded that
already
the,
achieved.
that one was fully supported by the Housing Committee. So number one was supported by the Housing Committee.
Okay,
A seconder?
Yeah, and so if I could have a seconder.
Sure.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Woodward. All those in favor of resolution number one? Did you have a question, Councillor? Okay, all in favor? Okay, and that carries. And on to number two.
so I'll move it.
Okay, moved by Councillor Payne, seconded by Councillor Lockenberg.
That council provide $5,000 in financial support from the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund to Nelson Cares to support the pre-feasibility study of 818 to 824 Front Street, subject to the application being supported by the Housing Committee. And I have a comment.
Okay, well, you moved the motion, so,
Okay, I'm hesitant to just add in on the table another subject too, but in the context of the long-term campus review at Rec 5, there's also been requests in the past about making sure that lot is protected in the sense of what its use may be in the expansion or future use for the NDCC itself, which is currently, its fitness center is still in the middle of, start of June, busting at the seams. I would want to make this subject to approval from Rec 5 or address that the pre-development feasibility is actually looking at what housing would look like on top of an expansion of the facility there, because I think, yeah, that's what I think needs to be in this for that property specifically, needs to appreciate and incorporate what might have to happen with recreation in that site over the next 30 years.
right, and just, so in terms of this, and I know that Councillor Payne probably would like to speak to this, but it's my understanding, and I'm only looking at Mr. Johnson because he used to work for the RDCK, although he wasn't in recreation, is that there is a, I think the RDCK vis-a-vis recreation has a first right of refusal on that property. I could be wrong, but I also, when I have talked in the past with Nelson Cares about that property, when they've come and asked all of us where there's property in town, I have mentioned to them that this is a piece of property that still has potentially recreational interest or other parties that have to be involved in the discussion. I will now turn to Councillor Payne, who would probably like to speak on this.
Yeah, I do want to make it known that Nelson Cares is well aware of that discussion and has opened communication with the RDCK so that they can make sure that all interested parties, and they're very willing to, engage and make that recreational facility part of their program, part of their build. They just, the reason that it's important for them to go forward now, and they've also talked to BC Housing about that being also acceptable, but they do want to have this, it's sort of a feasibility study so that they can apply in early 2025. And I know that the RDCK is planning to do the survey at the end of this year, from my understanding.
It's getting, yeah, we're framing it now.
Yeah, so that conversation is opened up and very flexible.
I'm gonna, if I may, I'm gonna make move an amendment that it be subject to approval from Rec 5. And I will look for a seconder for that.
I'll second that.
Okay.
And I'll just speak to it quickly, which is just, I appreciate all of that, but given the public benefit being derived from recreation on that site, the long-term investment that's been made there, I think that it has to be beyond just good intentions. There has to be a true decision-making component to Rec 5 to speak to that. And at the same time, the timelines simply may not line up in terms of what has been visioned for that site. but to take it off the table in the future once it's taken off and consumed, and whether we're driving it quickly to put something, just to have a base to put housing on, we need to have those discussions more fulsomely at Rec 5 on what the future of that site looks like to recreation. So I think we just need to have that conversation.
Councillor Payne.
I don't know if there's a way, is there any way to put a time frame around this? Because that property has been available and under consideration for a considerable amount of time. And now we have an opportunity to possibly deliver non-market housing in a critical time in our community. So I do understand the recreational needs of it, but I do have some concerns that this will dramatically slow down the delivery of more housing units that we know are critically needed.
And
I think there's a way to do both.
And I think the chair of that commission would be very sensitive to the needs of non-market housing, and I think we would definitely address this when it came forward. But I think it does need, we have no other land to expand into. I think we do need to have a decision-making component to this.
You got the parking lot.
Okay, I'm gonna.
Sorry.
I've given you guys grace
You
to
have,
debate
you have.
between the
Thank
two
you.
of you. Councillor Lockenberg.
Yeah, I mean, I seconded the amendment, but just to be clear that we're not voting on the amendment. Didn't we make it as a singular motion? So we're just voting on the.
Voting on,
The amendment for Rec 5.
He wanted to make an
has-
amendment, so I think, so it would be subject
Subject
to
to.
consultation and support of Rec 5.
Right, but you moved the motion.
Yeah.
So that's not just the
but
motion.
first you do the amendment, you vote on the amendment.
You vote on the amendment.
You may not want to include, it may get defeated.
Yeah. That's why I did it separately.
Right, so you didn't move the motion?
I moved the
You
motion.
moved the motion,
And it
but
was
then you
seconded.
moved an
Then I
amendment.
added an
And now we have
amendment
to
to
do,
discuss just
now we have to
whether-
pass the amendment,
Okay,
and then we go back to the,
okay.
I'll call the question on the amendment. Is that
Okay.
where we're at?
that's where we're at. Okay,
Unless you wanted to speak to the amendment.
Well, I
you
was
did
just,
second it, so,
yeah, I did second it. I'm going to say I very much support that this definitely go through Rec 5, that, and I'm hoping that this, given that the chair and we have a majority on that council, that it spurs action to get some planning done on that piece of land. So very much support it.
okay. So on the amendment, the question has been called, seeing no further debate. On the amendment, subject to consultation and support of Rec 5. And I'm sure that Sarah will make that much prettier than what I just said. So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Okay, and that carries. Back to the main motion, and that is that council provide $5,000 in financial support from the Affordable Housing Reserve to Nelson Cares to support the pre-feasibility study of 818 and 824 Front Street, subject to the application being supported by the Housing Committee. I don't know, Councillor Payne, do you want to discuss whether or not, again, this is a subject too, so I mean, until you have a next meeting and come back, you're okay with that?
Yep, totally fine.
Yeah,
Can't
that
imagine there
wasn't,
being
I
any
would've-
objections. I think there'll be the same enthusiasm that we saw
Yeah,
for the other
I would
project.
have done it if I'd known it was there. I would have done it at the last housing meeting, but.
Yeah, we
I'll
just,
move that
we
later.
just screech it
Okay.
in.
I'll move that.
And that was all, it's already been moved and
Is all
seconded.
okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so all those in favor of that? Okay, excellent.
It does, Mayor,
Yes.
if you could indulge me for a second, because I don't think this is part of the debate, but it does bring up an important topic for me.
Thanks, Natalie.
In understanding how does a municipality go about creating new footprints for public good and for community amenities? Because I understand that when a private developer on a private piece of land builds a building, that those amenities are earmarked for the residents. And I do understand that the city has ownership of properties that can be a public good in creating supportive and community housing. But I don't understand, once those footprints are gone, how do we go about ensuring that the community remains the livable space that we've all come to enjoy in its parks and recreation? I don't understand how we do that. And I'm interested in, is it a boundary expansion? Does it mean that now the city is trying to acquire private land because we've given our land to other projects? How do we ensure that we have the green spaces and the walking spaces and the picnic spaces and these amenities for the additional 57, 55, 100 units.
I think you've answered the question in your question.
Did I?
Yeah.
Oh, tell me.
Well, you talked about boundary expansion,
Yes,
buying private land.
right.
The only thing you left off was not doing anything with the land that we have available except for leaving it green.
Mayor, if I may.
I mean, there's probably a lot of other things that, if we had the planning department back in here, that would.
She left.
They left, but, yeah.
But
Councillor
that,
Lockwood,
that is what the OCP is for.
yeah.
Yeah, like
The
it's
OCP
to-
is supposed to give us the guidelines on that, and that's why it's so important to get out and participate in those conversations as well. It's that overarching, like Nelson Knox, it's the overarching document, but yes, there's always a good question is, what do you do when you've run out of land?
And then on this topic of planning and OCP and like one of the core functions of council, I think about the 300 units that are approved at the golf course, and I see the potential for our little mountain town to do the sprawl thing as cities tend
Want
to
to
do.
do, yeah.
And so then how do we, from a planning perspective, look at 300 houses, 150 cars, one curvy road up there, and ensure that we're building neighborhoods? I know that's what we do, but I'm not feeling that moment where we're doing that here at the table. And so I'm just interested in participating in that. And if it's only through the OCP, I find that interesting.
I think it's one way.
Yeah.
It's part of it, yeah.
Any comment?
I see Natalie has left.
But Tara's here.
Yeah, Tara's here. I don't know if you have comment, Tara. Please do come join. You know, I will say that one of the tools, and Natalie referred to it earlier, is the new ACCs, the amenity cost charges that the province has sort of enabled with us. So historically, we used rezoning to sort of get this type of thing. So when we would upzone something, then we would be able to get lands associated with it for use as amenities, things like that. You know, not that this is the fulsome answer beyond that, but one of the tools that we will have, you know, eventually will be the ACCs. So when people do build, they will have to pay an amenity cost, or like a charge that will go into a pot to build up funding to do things, whether it be buy land to build, or, you know, other aspects of creating those amenities. So, you know, it's obviously not the sort of silver bullet solution. I think that, you know, mentioned in the OCP and how things are managed, I think the planning process that Rec 5 is embarking on now, that we're obviously a big part of, is a critical piece to really look at the assets that we have and how we use them. So I'm not sure, Tara, if you have further comment to that.
Yeah, I think what did you call it? CAAs?
ACCs.
ACCs is one of the city's levers. But we could also be doing like a parks master plan, which would come underneath the OCP and provide much more detail about many different city levers we could be using.
Yeah.
So that could be something in the OCP that we consider doing.
Yeah, and apologies, yeah, and the Parks Master Plan, that is something that's approved. We're starting with the cemetery portion of it this year, and then looking at 25 to continue it to the remainder of the parks and really map that out and have a better understanding of sort of what we have and how it's being used and you know, where the shortfalls are with that, so.
Councillor Lockenberg, then Councillor Woodward.
I was just going to add, we also have the downtown waterfront master plan, which also defines a whole bunch of like, this is meant for parks and this is, you know, envisioning the future, including the ideas of land banks. Like the airport in the downtown waterfront master plan is called a land bank for the idea that we're setting it aside for potential future use, including potentially parks. So we've got, yeah.
Councillor Woodward, then Councillor Page.
So I would just say we're lucky as a mountain town that we have all kinds of green space just right on our borders, and then we're, you know, with rails and trails, and we use that regularly. Housing crunch, so it is this kind of balance, but I would say, you know, we're very lucky in that sense of where the geography of where we are and how much green space is just right around us.
And blue space.
And what?
Blue space.
And
Water.
and water space too.
And I just if I could follow up, Councillor Woodward, I mean, and you're correct about the fact that we're surrounded by it. But just to touch on the fact, and it's one of the other things that city staff are having to work on, is accessibility. And so for those people, there are many people in our community that don't get the pleasure of being able to access the forest or the rails, the trails, or, you know, extreme mountain biking. And they do need to have accessible pathways, and they are as entitled to quality green space as anyone else in the community. So we do have to find, as Councillor Tate's trying to get us to think about, finding that balance and making sure that everyone has access. Councillor Page, I think you're next.
So just what I'd heard that I'm interested in is within the Parks Master Planning, if we can specifically look at what expansion and improvement looks like. Is that a small sliver of yearly property taxes going into some sort of bank or funding mechanism, as Councillor Lautenberg has touched on? If that's in the Parks Master Planning process, I feel comfortable about that. I look at the Chatham Street Pocket Playground as one of those examples of just green space between spaces that you just come upon it, and it creates a little oasis where it's at. And those are good things to find, protect, and where they're missing, add them back in. So if that's an expansionary piece of our planning, that we understand how we're chasing that makes sense to me. And then I already raised it earlier, as much as I understand and appreciate individual properties fencing and creating privacy and et cetera, when we start to get beyond that, when we're multiple streets, multiple buildings, I would like, when we're getting into the amenity cost charges or whatever it happens to be, when we're discussing what our policy position is on those, that we explore how suitable, how much comfort we have about creating these little walled gardens that people have to walk around to get to places versus walking through, especially when they're entire sites, because I think it breaks our community up.
Councillor Tate.
To that point, I think there is going to be a walkway on Cedar Street that
There
goes
is.
across, right?
Yep.
Because that was
a street.
one challenge that we encountered up on Perrier Lane, was like
Yeah.
what had been a pathway became not a pathway. And so we're always looking for those things. If it is a pathway currently, we want to maintain those pathways as much as possible.
Okay, no further questions. We had passed everything,
Tara.
so this is what happens, the conversation that happens after we pass the motion.
know, I always
It doesn't
hate
have to
that.
do with the motion. Okay, so I'm gonna try
That's my
moving on.
specialty.
I'm gonna try to move
Further
on.
to
No, you're
that-
not the only one, Councillor Tate, so I just sort of think like, did I pass a motion?
You did. I always wait.
Okay.
I look when Sarah's
We have no delegations. Item number 13, bylaws, fees and charges amendments, Tourist Park. The city campground provides an opportunity for visitors to stay in town at an affordable cost and access the amenities Nelson has to offer on foot, by bicycle, or vehicle. The campground is proposing to increase revenues and modernize some of its policies. Staff research comparable municipality campground fees and charges and policies to address differences and stay competitive. Council is requested to approve the first three readings to the fees and charges amendment, Tourist Park Bylaw 3605/2024, and adopt the campground policy 61400030. We've got a package there of information,
Move, Mayor.
and it's been moved by Councillor Woodward. Is there a seconder?
Second.
And
Are we doing one at a time?
We have to do these one at a time.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Number one,
Yes.
that the Corporation of the City of Nelson Fees and Charges Amendment Bylaw number 3605/2024 be introduced and read a first and second time by title only.
Thank you. Councillor Lockenberg,
Oh, if
you're
I,
seconding.
yeah,
Yeah.
and can I speak?
Yeah.
I'm actually tempted to refer this back to staff. After looking at the fees, I think the full service site in particular, but even the partially serviced site, those seem very low, and that's in comparison to other RV parks. Like the tents, the fees seem fine and in line, but the $50 a night for a full service site is like $25 below comparators.
Which ones? Because there's some on page 9.
Yeah, like the ones that I looked at beyond, like for a kind of a quality campground of what I compared. And I was looking at some communities like the city of Squamish, in terms of like, who does it draw and what, and those things go at $75 a night. And so I think it's such a valuable asset. When I talk to people who are there, they love it. And $50 a night for that quality seems far too low to me. You disagree?
I think we've done the research and we've done comparables. We've looked at other campgrounds, and the rates that we've come up with seem fair and still allow it to be accessible for the majority of people who want to camp and be in town.
Sure, I get I like the tent platform and the unserviced site, but it's when you're at a fully serviced site. Like I used to have an RV, like a Sprinter van RV, and those are, they're $120,000 vehicles, or, it's rare you're going to get an RV for less than that. And I think most of the RVs that I see up there are pretty quality that are accessing those service sites. And if you have an RV and you can't afford it, you can go with a site that's not serviced and still park your RV. But for that one in particular, it just strikes me as way too
$50
low.
and $1 a foot.
There you go. But okay, that's just my feeling. I feel like it's in demand from what I can tell. It's like really good.
Well, you know what, and the thing is that we could change this, or we could make these changes the way they are now, and then ask to see how it went. Like how many people are we turning away? I don't know whether or not, I don't know what they collect for statistics up there, but how many people are we turning away that were looking for a full hookup? Because you know what, if I drive one of those things, I probably just don't want to pull into a spot unless I'm just staying for one night and I just needed to stop somewhere. I mean, I'm probably, if I have a fancy RV, I probably want the full hookup, but maybe we could look at who's being turned away, and we could look at making adjustments, in future years. It's not that these things can't come back.
I think it would be worth making the change for year one. There's a few changes that are being made in the policy, as well as the amount that you pay for a site. And I just think it would be worthwhile to stop, pause for a year, see how this goes with our reservation system. It also depends on the weather. So just sort of see how things go for year one. We have, and then we can reevaluate again. Like this is the first year that we've actually addressed the fees for a number of years.
Yeah, fair. Okay.
Councilor Woodward, Page, Payne.
I would just say, in this particular situation where the city is offering, a service that, like the NDCC or other things that we offer, we keep it affordable. And, people with RVs may not necessarily be $125,000 Sprinter vans. Maybe they just put one together and, they don't have a lot of money, and we should offer a site in town for an affordable price, considering to stay in a hotel now is quite expensive. And this might be one of the rare opportunities that people would actually have to come visit our town and be able to afford to come visit. So I'm really in favor of keeping it at a very fair, decent price. And then, like Sarah was saying, in a year, it'd be good to see that data and see where we're at.
Yeah.
Councilor Page.
Yeah, the one that highlights for me, and I'm good with the update. I'm good with coming back next year with some reflection. The Sandy dump for non-campers, is $15 really capturing both the impact on the other users of the park as well as the lack of places that people can go do that service already? Like $15 seems, we're not really capturing the impact, and people are going to be in a tight spot and need to use that service regardless.
And we're the only Sandy dump around.
That's my point.
Right? So, yeah, I know. And I think this is the first year we've pulled the two apart. So for actual paying users of the campground and then people who just pull in. And it would be very worthwhile to just stop and see what happens with, are people going to continue to come to the campground if they have to pay $5 more? Some people will, some people won't, but we need to monitor that. And have a chance to see if it's going to work. Maybe we do need to charge more. Maybe we need to charge less. I don't know.
Okay, well, on that one, it's not necessarily one we need to invite, right?
Yeah. And I would be with you on that one, listen, I don't want Counselor, no, wait, I got Counselor Payne and then get back to Counselor Lockenberg for a second time.
I'm just interested, is the objective, is this a profit objective for us at the campground, or are we breaking even? It's hard to tell from these numbers. Are we covering our costs? Are we creating a bit of a reserve for future improvements? Do these relate to that, or has that just been not part of the picture here?
So initially, we took on the campground, the municipality took on the campground to provide an opportunity for youth to work. So it was sort of a social enterprise. Now it actually generates revenue, but it does go into general revenues. It does cover the cost of the campground and a little bit more. So we benefit definitely from, as a municipality, as an organization, we benefit from having the campground. But again, we don't want to, so what, right? Like, we don't want to price ourselves out of the kind of people that we want to attract to the town.
Yeah, no, I think that's important, though, to understand what our value is in having that campground. 13 years ago, I pulled into Nelson in my Westphalia and camped there for 2 weeks while I went out every day when you could actually find a place to live, having arrived. And so it was an incredible value. I didn't have to drive in from another camp area. And I think seeing people walk into town from there to go to the restaurants and shop in, it's a huge value for us. So I think that it's important that the prices are reasonable and, but balanced, that they provide a service that will improve that asset as we move forward.
I think it's really important as an asset, but also it provides an opportunity for youth to do some work. And so they often work through the process of the youth center, and then they end up at the campground, and so they just get some really great experience at the campground. So there's that piece as well. Mm-hmm. And I think we don't want to lose sight of that.
Councilor Lockenberg.
Yeah, I already made my argument for the full service sites, and I'd still continue to argue for a definite increase on that. But for a little bit of context, when I first joined council in 2018, there was a conversation around the city campground and moving the campground to Lakeside, like to the airport lands, where we wouldn't remove the transfer station and then develop that area and potentially turn that into the campground. And part of the argument for that was is that the best and highest use of that land? And even in the last campaign, we talked a lot about that campground being an opportunity for affordable housing, for example, and the cost to the city of having that campground, certainly if it's break even, is a dramatic loss of tax revenue. So it's effectively, given the potential highest and best use, it's a taxpayer subsidy. And in a time when taxpayers are facing, increasing and pushing many taxpayers to the limit, I think we have to consider this campground doing more than just being a nice amenity for tourists to come. I think our first obligation is to the city and to taxpayers, and really look from their perspective in terms of what delivers them the most value. And then second, to the community, the growth of community itself. Tourists, I think, the few tourists we get at the campground are great. I love it. If we could support it, it would be great. But compared to, for example, the need for workforce housing, or the need for more low-income housing, or certainly tax revenue, it's still an open question in my mind. And all that being said, this leads me to what I think I'd like to consider at this point, given that we're talking about the campground, and that's the number of people who live and work in our communities who are living out of their vehicles. There are many more than we consider, and we don't have a place for them. So I know a number of them, they're parking in random places around the community. I would much rather see them in the campground and having a place that's supported, that's sort of reliable, and there's sort of maybe a more long-term agreement with those residents, or we find a place for them separate and apart from the campground that supports people who are already living in our community, who contribute to the community, work in the community, but don't have a place where they can safely, comfortably park their car in a reliable way. So I just wanted to put that on the table as something to consider going forward as we talk about the campground.
Thank you, Councillor Awkward. So councillors, we have in front of us a motion, and it's been moved and seconded. And so all those in favor of recommendation number 1? And that carries. And if I could ask somebody for recommendation number 2?
Move.
By Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Tate. Councillor Woodward.
That the Corporation of the City of Nelson Fees and Charges Amendment Bylaw number 3605, 2024 be read a third time by title only.
Seeing any further discussion? None. All those in favor? And that carries. And recommendation number 3. Moved by Councillor Tate, seconded by Councillor Woodward. Councillor Tate.
That council adopt campground policy 6140.00.030 as amended.
All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you, councillors. Very good debate on the city campground. On to item number 14A. Emergency Operations Center, UBCM grant. Nelson Emergency Management is applying for UBCM grant funding to further support the development of the city's public notification plan and strengthen our communication channels through additional training for response personnel and communication staff and web page upgrades. The training will build on the exercise from May 2024 and allow the City of Nelson to be better prepared to notify the public in the event of an emergency. The grant application is for $30,000 with $7,200 in-kind contributions. The total cost of the project is estimated at $37,200. As part of the grant application process, a council resolution is required that supports the UBC grant application and overall grant management. There's some information there, and do we have a mover? Moved by Councillor Woodward, and is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Tate. Councillor Woodward.
Whereas council supports EOC enhancement through emergency management principles, therefore be resolved that the Corporation of the City of Nelson be authorized to apply for a $30,000 grant funding under the UBCM Public Notification Evacuation Route Planning 2024 Community Emergency Preparedness Fund, and for the City of Nelson staff be responsible for the overall grant management.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none.
Oh, can I just make a comment?
Sure can.
I sit on the Emergency Management Committee, and I just want to say it's been really impressive the last 5, 6, 7 years how much we've increased our capacities and our resiliency, and having the EOC in the basement, and the coordination between emergency service here in Nelson and the RDCK is getting much more refined. Table talk exercises are happening. It just feels like we're in a really good place around this particular item. So really happy to sit on that committee and see this work being done.
That's great. No, I think that we're doing an excellent job in the area of emergency management. So thank you for that, Councillor Woodward. All those in favor of the motion? And that carries. Item number 14B, Police Board Council Appointment. Changes introduced to the Police Act are intended to improve governance and oversight of policing. Changes to governance allows local governments to determine who their council representative will be on their police board rather than the automatic appointment of the mayor, who, as was the previous case. Council is now requesting to appoint a member of council to the Nelson Police Board. The appointment shall be effective as soon as the appointment is made by resolution.
Pretty amazing.
Councillor Tate.
Could I recommend that council appoint Mayor Janice Morrison to the City of Nelson Municipal Police Board effective immediately? Can I add a name in there for the motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Is
I
there
would
a
like to do
seconder?
that.
I would second that.
Question.
We have to wait for the motion to make
I
a
know, I
question.
know. I
Okay,
just-
so it's been moved and it's been seconded, and we have
Seconded it, sorry.
Counselor Page, Counselor Payne, then Counselor Lockwood.
I'm just interested how long the term is for. Did I see that?
You know what,
obviously
it's
didn't see
interesting
it,
is
or I
that there
would have
is,
asked.
there is no term here,
Thank
so
you.
I would imagine
Okay.
that, and I read through that because I was trying to figure it out, because there is a term, actually, so there's two steps in this, is that now the police board will, like whoever's there, it will now decide who the chair is, and they have to also appoint a vice chair. We've never had a vice chair. Now, for them, that chair can only be there for 2 years. So I went through all of the, and I would imagine that now that this would kind of be on when we do that first of the year appointment. And so, like anything else, it could be, like when we first got elected, you know, we went year on transit, year on emergency services, that this would now become one that we would review at the beginning of a term, and whoever got appointed, you could try it out. If it didn't work, obviously you would come back to the mayor of the day to make sure it gets on a council meeting to change, or that kind of like mid 4-year cycle, do we look at swapping up seats or whatever for that? But I saw nothing. I did read through it because it's very clear that as far as being the chair or the vice chair,
We do know.
it's limited. Did you find something?
Yeah, I think it says in section 24, and yeah.
Can't go past 6 years.
It says, in respect of a member of the council appointed under section 23(1)A to a municipal police board, the council member's membership on the board is for the term that the council determines, subject to the following restrictions. The term must not be longer than 4 years,
Right,
and the term ends if the person ceases to be a member of council.
right.
So you can determine it by the looks of things, that council determines. Yeah.
And so I think it would fall into our normal kind of process where we could review it, or if a person wasn't happy, it's not like you got that at the beginning of an election cycle and we're there for 4 years. And I thought it was a maximum of 6 years if you keep reading through that.
Yeah,
article.
I
It kinda
can
seemed
quickly
kind
read
of odd,
point
but-
2 is in respect of a person appointed under section 23(1)B or C to a municipal police board, the person's membership on the board is for the term not longer than 4 years, that A, in the case of an appointment under section 23(1)B, the council determines, or B, in the case of an appointment under section 23(1)C, the lieutenant governor and council determines. 3, a person may be reappointed as a member of the municipal police board, but a person appointed under paragraph B or C of section 23(1) must not, by way of appointment, under either or both of these paragraphs, be an appointed member for a period of more than 6
years.
consecutive years.
Yeah, so.
And then it goes on, and then it talks a bit about board and vice chair.
Council Lockwood.
Normally when we do these things, we solicit like who's interested and then kind of get a sense of it. Because I'm assuming, I think we're assuming you're interested, and I think you'd be great
Yeah,
to return it.
I'm fine with staying. It's just that we have to, like,
Yeah.
the thing here was,
It's got to be done by the end of July.
it's got to be done like within the next month, like by the 25th of July. It's amazing how, I mean, the Police Act reform started like 6 years ago. And then they finally decided like in February, they would sort of, what's always been considered picking off the low hanging fruit, and that is not have the mayor as an automatic appointee.
Yeah.
And so they tell us that in February, it filters out in March, and all of a sudden they gave us this window to, you know, like a 3-month window to have it done. And I'm quite happy to stay there.
Okay.
And I've actually, well, I had the discussion with the board, like they don't see a need for change. They're very happy to see that it's not an automatic appointment. And I think these things will take some time to filter out and see how they work. So I'm very comfortable with staying on. So if that's the purview of council, Councillor Page.
With respect, I would offer, if the table's interested, a term of 1 year. It is very quick. We'll be a year out from the election at that point. I just think it'd be interesting to have this conversation next year too. I think this is spectacular. This legislation is changing, and like you say, the low-hanging fruit, so that these boards can organize themselves. But maybe this is something we want to just visit in a year. But I'm really looking to you to see how you feel about that. Because I respect your experience over there, but.
I think that, I think continuity in some respects is still key there, because unfortunately, and it's no fault of the cities and it's no fault of the police board.
Yeah.
I guess we can sort of say it's the fault of the provincial government, but that process of Cabro, so that selection process, is that we still, so since I have been
Yeah.
on the police board, we have never had a full complement. And for matter of fact, for a while there, we were 4. And so it would be very nice, as you know, we have made internal, we're not going to go out the name, so it's in camera work.
Oh.
We have made an appointment that we are allowed to have, that's known information. And that person still has to go through the Cabro-like process. It's hard to say when that will get completed, because the other thing is it has to be approved by the, what's the appropriate term, the council, the.
Lieutenant Governor.
Yeah, there's some process that has to be approved, and I'm at the point where I'm sort of thinking, are we gonna have any approval? It has to be a council, a committee in.
Lieutenant Governor and Council.
Yeah, in council, like, so it's got a process that it has to go through. And so my thing is do the bureaucrats continue to do that when there's nobody sitting in the house? And I don't know that occurs. So we might not see our appointee there if they get through Cabro until after the election. We're also short, we had a board member that resigned before their first meeting. And I know that there's been some interviews, but when will we get that other person? So I think that there's been a fair amount of change. We've got one new person on, and we have one person whose term actually expires in March of next year. So I sort of look at myself as a bit of continuity right at this time. If we had a full-on, everybody was there, I'd say, sure, let's
Then I won't make that amendment.
let's look again. But I think right now, some continuity to give some stability would be worthwhile. Councilor Warwick.
I also want to highlight you have an incredible amount of experience working in these areas too. So I think in terms of your union work and in terms of your actual work, you just have a lot of experience in working on boards. And so I feel I have a lot of confidence that you have a great handle on what's happening there. And we're also in this, it's a complicated time, policing. So I'm really glad you're there. And you're a solid person there that's there every meeting kind of thing.
Thank you for your vote of confidence, Councilor Wood. Councilor Payne.
I feel the same support, and I certainly wouldn't want to change it, and the reasons you've just explained are excellent. The other component of that, though, is succession planning, so that you do at some point in time, while you have this strong, deep background of support, maybe have someone go into the role to have that mentorship so that they can strengthen those skills and provide that continuity. And I don't understand from this when that 6-year term would be up. So does that count the time you spent there? Is it just from the appointment now that your term ends? So sometime in that intervening period, we will need someone to enter that role that would have the support of current to go in and offer that same level of deep understanding and guidance.
So what I want to say is that we've all been invited to a meeting next month where we have someone coming from policing. And so I think I have many questions given the changes that I would like to get a fuller grasp on. And I think those are the kind of questions to be asking. But I would see that every election cycle now for municipal government that has a municipal force is that there will be someone selected from that committee at the start of each election cycle for whatever the term might be. So, any further questions or comments or? So it's been moved and it's been seconded. I don't want to read that. I don't like to read my own name. Yeah, Councillor Tate, can you just read it again?
I can, yep.
I just feel self-serving.
That council passes the following resolution, that council appoint Mayor Morrison to the City of Nelson Municipal Police Board effective immediately.
Thank you. And thank you for having the faith in me, council, to continue in that role. So we are on to,
Oh, do we have to?
We don't have
oh, call a question. So, yeah.
You're so humble, you're not even calling the
She's so
vote.
kerfluffled by hearing her name.
Okay, all those in favor? Okay,
There
thank
go,
you.
Mayor.
Item number 15, we've got some minutes here, and what all do we have? So we have the Cultural Development Committee, the NAEDP, Public Library, and the Nelson Housing Committee. We can pass those as a group unless someone sees that they would like to pull one out for further discussion.
I'll move the group.
I think
Oh.
Councillor Payne wants to
Payne.
pull one
Sorry.
out, so I'm just gonna defer to her for a second.
Okay.
I just wanted to highlight the fact that in the NAEDP Coordinating Committee report, it was really exciting to see the depth of work they're doing around childcare spaces and coordinating with other groups in the community, because we all know that now that the housing is moving forward in seems like a fulsome way, childcare is another big vacuum. And I can say that from personal experience with my daughter having a child. She hasn't even had the child. When she found out she was pregnant, she went to go on, and you can't even get on a waiting list now. You can't get on a waiting list. That's how dire the need is. So it was very gratifying to see all the work that the NAEDP is doing. Thank you, kudos to them, and hopefully any support they need, they will know that we are here supporting that very worthwhile work as well. That's the only thing I want to bring forward.
Okay, so we have items 1 through 4, and that the motion is that the council receive the committee and commission meeting minutes as information.
I'll move that.
Okay, that's been moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Tate. All those in favor? And that carries. And then we are moving on to reports. And so we have on the reports list this evening, finance and development services, both permits, statistics, and an OCP update briefing note. Is there any items there that a councillor wishes to pull out? Or Councillor Woodward, are you passing in?
I just wanted to ask a question.
Okay.
On the detailed listing, invoices over 25,000. I was wondering about Nelson Cares UBCM 2022-2023 final payment for 110,000. What is that?
That's their grant that we because it's a UBCM grant.
Yes, okay.
It flows through the city. I can even answer that. I was going to say,
Yeah.
don't ask one of those questions when the CFO isn't here. That flows through us to Nelson Cares.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Actually,
Councillor Tate, oh, now you're going to test me on
no.
my financial
That
knowledge?
brings up something from our previous conversation, but it's money related. The ready grants are CBT money.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
But if a councillor were to have discretionary funds or that other kind of policy, grant and aid policy, that would be not CBT money.
Right.
Okay, just, sorry, I'm a little
It would be
slow
our
on
money.
it.
It would be our money.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you, carry on.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got items 1, 2, and 3 there. I need a motion that council will receive the reports presented by staff, but for information. Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Tate. All those in favor? And that carries. We had no notices of motion, no late items. So, council, I would like to ask for a resolution to adjourn. Why is that so hard? Okay, I got a mover and a seconder. Now let's see who puts their hand up when I say all in favor, because this is the weakest vote I have all night, is to adjourn. Okay, so I've got 4 hands there from 2 people, so I'll say that we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.